The Mind Matters Mental Health and Wellness series is a collective of mental health professionals, coaches, and advocates focused on eradicating the stigma surrounding mental illness in Black and Brown communities. We understand the trauma of marginalized and oppressed people and the barriers to overall wellness in our communities. Through this vehicle, we will impart knowledge of diagnoses, symptoms, interventions, and treatment from a holistic perspective of mind, body, and spirit. Mind Matters will serve as a catalyst for change in Black and Brown communities around the world.
Hello, hi, and everything in between. Welcome back to Passion and Purpose Fulfilled and Mind Matters. We are here today with a very special guest, Miss Antwanette Weaver from A Bold Story Never Ends. And so, as we always do, everyone, remember we are caring for ourselves and we are listening to our body. So, let's start with our typical breathing. So, we're going to take a deep breath in. And we're going to release. And we're going to take another deep breath in. And we're going to release. And so for our mindful moment on today, we are going to just take a soft check-in. Because what we're talking about today is suicide awareness. And September is Suicide Awareness Month. And we want everyone to be in a space where they can hear, they can see, and they can feel, and they can speak up, and they can lean on, and they can reach out. So I want you to think about yourself right now. I want you to think, where am I in my health right now? Be it your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health. And I want you to ask yourself, am I being kind to myself? Am I okay? And I want you to know that it's okay if you're not okay. I'm wearing a shirt today from Mind Matters. From A Bold Story. And it says, I'm fine. And as you saw, the words are intertwined into I am fine. So I want you to ask yourself, am I fine? So we'll pause. We'll take a moment. And we're going to reflect. We're going to take another deep breath in. We're going to take another deep breath in. And our last one. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Weaver, for joining us today. I'm super excited. I have been planning with Ms. Weaver to get her on the show so that we can discuss and talk about a bold story that never ends. And I will just, why this is so important. And you guys know, if you've watched my show before, you know I'm always talking about the why. This is important for just those things that we discussed in the mindful moment, that sometimes we don't know it's okay not to be okay. We don't know that it's okay to say, I'm not fine. And we don't always listen and adhere to our bodies, in our minds, in our health, to ensure that we're doing those things to get us healthy. And so, Miss Antwanette, tell us a little bit about A Bold Story Never Ends, what got you started, and where we are in this journey for you.
Okay, thank you, Rashawn. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, we've been working on this, and I'm so excited that today has finally come.
Yes.
And so I am a licensed professional counselor by trade, but in July 22, I'm sorry, July 2020, I got a text message from my son at 11:10 a.m. and it said, "I'm so sorry. I'm very tired. I love you." And so I got that text message. It took me a minute to process, and then I started calling him. I called him 5 times back to back, no answer. And then about 5 minutes later, I got a phone call, and it was from a 936 area code, which is Huntsville, where he was living at the time. And so I just started to scream. My daughter, fortunately, was here. I gave her the phone, and sure enough, it was someone letting us know that we needed to get to Huntsville right away because Cameron had shot himself. And so, as I said, I had been a LPC, and Cameron, both Cameron and myself, we both suffered from depression and anxiety throughout our lives. Cameron was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and Crohn's related arthritis when he was 16 years old, and so it took a really hard hit on him. He was going into his junior year of high school. He had all these plans. He wanted to be a police officer, which of course required physical abilities and things, and his body just started to shut down. And he was told within that year that he was going to be treated with medications that could potentially lead to him developing cancer as a result, that he would probably not be able to have children because the medication would impact that, and also that it could impact his liver. So he lost 35 pounds in less than a week. And so that was a hard hit. He was about the time that we got the official diagnosis and the treatment started, he was getting ready to transition on to start his college career. And so he started school, but he was, for about a year and a half, it was really hard because we were trying to find the right medications to treat him. Some mornings his joints would swell so bad, his jaw, he could barely move it. And so it was really hard for, a young man to deal with that. And then, of course, he started dating. And then Cameron was a true empath, and he loved really hard. And so he only had two or three serious girlfriends within his short lifetime, but he was very, much so um, addicted to love, I would say. He wanted that love, and then when it didn't work out, it was very hard for him, especially in his last relationship, because with the other ladies, he was able to maintain the friendships with them even after the relationship ended. And so in that most recent relationship, she wanted to just separate, disconnect, and move forward. And so he struggled with that. And when we talked every day at 5 o'clock, he called me and he would talk on his way home. He was a probation officer at the time. That was also a huge part of his struggle because he didn't understand, why our system is built the way that it is. He said, "Mom, I'm not okay with these people trying to make a change. They're out of jail, they're on probation, they're paying their monthly fees, but yet, they don't have the money to pay them because they can't get jobs. We're not really rehabilitating them. We're not setting them up for success." And so that was really hard for him. And so he was in the process of deciding, what's he going to change his career. He was in a position, although his pay wasn't great, of course, because he was in public service, but he had good benefits. And that was important because of his treatment, because
Right.
one treatment alone was $5,000 a month, you know. And his insurance with the government covered all of that. And so, he was having a hard time, and we were talking about it. And, I'm trying to be the responsible mom and say, well, just, you have 2 more years before you're vested, and then you'll have these benefits and, all of this to fall back on. But it came to a point, and he was like, "Mom, I can't do it anymore." And so I said, okay, I understand that. What are we going to do? What's the next plan? And so, he started looking into. He was very proud of me, working towards my LPC degree, and he was like, how can we work together to push forward your cause? Because at the time I was still working as a school counselor, not using the LPC. And he was like, Mom, you work too hard for that. How are you going to use that? And I was in a position, I was in the district, nearly 20 years at that point. And I'm like, okay, I can't just walk away from this retirement, much like I was preaching to him, but I want to do this LPC work. So I was kind of like at a crunch time. Do I stay with the district or do I go out and pursue, my LPC? And so thankfully, we got to the point where I didn't have to make that choice. But
Mhm.
Cameron had decided he was going to also pursue his degree and his license. Instead of becoming an LPC, he thought he would do psych nursing, and then that way we could join our efforts. And so we were in this planning phase all through the year. COVID hits, and then things kind of shut down. And so he's in Huntsville, we're here, but we're still talking every day. And I could hear it in his voice that he was getting really frustrated with things that were going on. And so, I remember asking him, was he okay? And he was like, it's hard, but I'm good. And I asked him, I said, are you having any thoughts? Because he had suicidal ideations previously. And so, I wanted to make sure that he wasn't having those at the time. And he's like, no, no, it's not like it's been in the past. And we talked about him pursuing therapy, and he did look into it. And then, but it was, either he couldn't find someone that accepted his insurance. He was adamant that he wanted a male. And so, that had become a struggle. And I said, you know what, we'll do what we need to do. If I have to pay out of pocket for this, connect with someone. And he
Mhm.
said to me, he's like, Mom, you're my therapist. He's like, you're there whenever I need you. He said, and I promise if I ever need anything, I'll call.
Mm.
And throughout that year, he did that. I mean, even if it was 2 a.m. and he was feeling low, he would call me and we would talk through it. But again, he was adamant that he wasn't having any suicidal ideations. And so when I got that call that the morning of July 13th, 2020, it rocked my world.
Mm.
Because again, not only am I a mom who's faced with losing her son, I'm a therapist
Right.
who lost, someone. How could I not know where he was? How could I
Right.
not know what he was thinking? Because he shared everything with me. And
Mm.
so I think, like I said, I just remember saying to everyone who called, what am I supposed to do without my baby? How
Right.
am I supposed to live this life without my child? I had Cameron when I got pregnant at 15, had him, right after I turned 16. So we literally grew up together.
Right.
Everything that Antoinette was at that time was because of our relationship and because of what I promised God and myself that I would do for this child. Because, I also almost lost him at 12 when I was, 24 weeks pregnant. He was coming early
Mm.
and I was on bed rest for that point. And to even back up earlier than that, when I found out I was pregnant, I was about 12 to 14 weeks, and they told me I'd miscarried. And I remember, being that 15-year-old girl on the ride from the doctor's office to the hospital to get a DNC, bargaining with God, saying, if you take care of, if you save my baby, I will do everything I can to mother him and to give him a
Mm.
good life. And miraculously, I got to the hospital. His heartbeat was strong, and they hadn't heard it before at the doctor's office. And so,
Yes.
we set forth on this mission, and you know, and fast forward 20, like I said, to July 13, 2020, there, and I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And I'm
Mm.
like, I have to do something because I'm naturally a planner.
Right.
I need to have a plan, and
Mm.
just, I was not okay. I didn't know how I was going to be okay, but I knew, like I said before, I don't dedicated my entire life to being his mom and to take care of my children, and I needed to take care of him even in his death.
Right.
So I started to talk to my daughter, Aaliyah, and I said, I need to do something. I said, we need, and someone gave me the idea of the nonprofit. At that point, I didn't even really know what a nonprofit was or how I needed to, what that would mean and how I would even, produce that. But thankfully, God surrounded me with so many individuals who had insight and who fed into me. And so November 16th, 2022, A Bold Story Never Ends became an official nonprofit. And it's named by my daughter Aaliyah because we were trying to connect it to Cameron, but yet, have a meaningful purpose for everyone. And so
Yes.
Cameron lived in boldness. Yeah, he lived in boldness. He never hesitated. Whatever he wanted to do, he did. And so in 2021, I took that vow. I said, I'm going to carry that on. I said, I'm going to live in boldness, because I was always the one who lived in fear, like, what if it wasn't secure, I wasn't doing it, because again, I had to take care of myself and my kids. So,
Right.
I took the safe route. And so in
Mm.
that year, I claimed, I'm living in boldness, and I did that. And so when it came time to give the organization a name, my daughter said, well, why don't we call it A Bold Story Never Ends?
Oh,
Because he lived in boldness, and now we were living in that same boldness, and we felt that his story just could not end, with his death. And so this is
definitely.
our way of carrying that forward. And it's also my way of working through my grief and my loss, of him, but also being true to my purpose of being a mental health professional, and working to make sure that we educate people, inform them, and make them aware, and also give them strategies so that no mother ever has to go through what, I've had to go through for the past 3 years, because it has truly been devastating.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for sharing Cameron's story and your story and a bold story. So I do want to ask, and I just was having this conversation yesterday, actually, in regards to how do you know when you don't know, especially when you're on the outside. As a therapist myself, that is always another pull for me. It's like, okay, when my clients come in, or when my family comes in, or even for myself, as you shared, you have been diagnosed or had bouts with depression and anxiety in your past. I too have had situational depression at a time where I contemplated, I had the ideation, I had the plan. I can't fully say that I had intent, but I definitely had the plan and I had the ideation. And I always say, as Cameron was your holder, my son Derek was mine. He woke up as I was thinking this plan through. And he was about 6 months old, 6 or 8 months old, somewhere up in there. And it was just the two of us. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And he wakes up and he's crying. And of course, he's 6 to 8 months old. He can't communicate what's going on. I'm in my own world of feeling of, this is too much. I'm tired. I can't get through this, because I was in the midst of going through a divorce and all these things. And I'm looking at him and I'm looking at my plan, and I'm looking at him and I'm looking at my plan, and he's just crying. And so, of course, I kick into mother mode. I got to take care of him. I'm changing diaper, I'm feeding, I'm doing all these things. And he still wouldn't stop crying. And I'm sitting there like, okay, as a mother, I have to be here. But as a person, I don't want to be here. And from 1 to 6 in the morning, he cried, and he saved my life, because I didn't act on it, because my motherhood kicked in. And my motherhood said, I got to be here. And then I had to think, how long would he have had to cry if I wasn't? So, because nobody knew, we were there by ourselves, and he couldn't talk, you know? So my question, and as I was speaking on yesterday, we talk about ideation, plan, but we never talk about that intent, because that's the kicker. That's the big piece of it. So as a therapist, and as a mother, and as a um survivor, because you are a survivor of this traumatic event, how do we how do we start to gauge, or what can we start to look at to gauge if this person has intent? Because that's the bigger piece than the plan and the ideation.
Right. And unfortunately, that isn't a very easy question, because a lot of people struggle and they don't talk about it. And I honestly believe, in some cases, people start to, when they start to have that intent, they start to say goodbye. They start dropping little hints or messages. A big thing is giving away their prized possessions, or having those conversations with people who they may have been kind of on the outs with, just because they want to rectify that before moving on. But in our case, that didn't occur. Even going into Cameron's apartment afterwards, we were looking for signs. Was he here? Because that was the big thing for me too. It's just like, how long has my baby been having these thoughts?
Mhm.
Was he going to bed every night wrestling with this, but not able to tell me? But with him, I think it was truly a split minute, a split decision. In that moment, he just felt so overwhelmed and he just didn't see another way out. But again, that was very hard for me because I needed to have, I should have been there to save him.
Mhm.
And I didn't do enough. I failed him, but, as my daughter Leah pointed out, it was like, Mom, you were the only person that he reached out to in that moment. Even in his pain, he thought of you and he wanted to make sure that you were okay. And so, back to your question, it's just so hard. But I think the thing that we have to do is we just have to keep a close eye out. And I think also we have to speak to each other, because afterwards, so many of Cameron's friends and loved ones had little pieces, but they didn't, that I could have put together as a professional, but no one else maybe had not noticed. But we have to look, we have to listen, we have to hear, and not just hear what they're saying, but their actions. We have to listen to what they're doing. If they're posting on social media about pain or hurt, or if they are isolating, or if they are, just in a slump for extended periods of time. If they, let's say, they don't have weapons in the home, but all of a sudden they go out and they purchase weapons, or they're hoarding medications or things of that nature, or they're talking about, what life would be after, and how would it be after death, or how would it be if they were gone. So I think that that's the way we have to look at it, because truly, it's truly a person that truly wants to end it, they're not going to forewarn you per se, because they don't want you to intervene. And so
Right.
we just have to do a good job of listening and watching what's happening and looking for those signs.
Definitely. So, what would you say, or how can you articulate to those that may be survivors, right, of the completed suicide? What can we give to those listeners or those viewers?
I think you said it earlier, that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be fine, because with me, I lost my child. That's not, the order of things.
Right.
Loss and grief is difficult, and you don't want to lose anyone that you love. But when you lose someone that you gave birth to, that's a difficult thing to overcome. And so, people, and then unfortunately in our society, we deal with grief by, unfortunately, just trying to encourage the griever to get over it.
Right.
We And with grief, I mean, loss, when you lose someone, I had 29 years to love Cameron. I can't just walk away from that, because it's been 6 months and I've grieved long enough. you
Mhm.
know I will walk in that loss for the rest of my life. So I had to accept that that was my reality. Things were not going to go back to normal. I was
Mhm.
never going to be okay, with that loss, but yet I could find a way, I could find a purpose to continue to live each day. And that's exactly what I do. I wake up each morning, I make a conscious decision to live that day. Because just like you mentioned earlier, Rashawn, with Cameron's loss, it would have been so much easier for me as his mom to go right behind him.
Right.
But I had my daughter who needed me. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, she had just moved back home. So every day as she walked in my room, it was a reminder that I have to push on for her,
Mhm.
that I have to live for her. And I did that for as long as I could. I lived for her. But now I'm just transitioning to 3 years later, where I'm in a position where I'm honestly starting to live for myself,
Mhm.
because my total complete identity was wrapped up in my children. And so I didn't really know who Antoinette was outside of being their mom.
Right.
I got married at 18, like I said, at Cameron at 16, got married at 18. I was married over 20 something years. That relationship ended. So my entire identity, as a wife and a mother, was uprooted first with the divorce. I was no longer a wife,
Right.
and what does that look like outside of
Right.
being 18-year-old who's now, approaching 40 years old. It's very different. And then, a couple years later, I'm a mother of two, but yet one of them is not here. And
Mm.
so, even that question rocked my world. When the first time I was asked, how many kids do you have? And that really sent me spiraling, because how do I answer that?
Right.
I don't, delete him because he's not here. He's still my child. But when you answer yes, then that question that follows is, well, how old are they, or what are they doing? And so that was an adjustment. So, like I said, I say all that to say is, feel what you're feeling. There are going to be so many different things that come up. And at times, you don't even have time to prepare for them. It's just like I said, that first time that question is asked, on the spot, you have to figure out how I'm gonna answer that.
Right.
And it's okay if you fumble. It's okay if you respond in a way that upsets the person who asked, because ultimately you're in survival mode and you have to take care of you. And it's up to them to take care of what they need to take care after you've provided them the information that you provided them. So, you have to let go of that responsibility. Just healing is enough on your own. You can't worry about how it's
Mhm.
impacting everyone else around you,
Right.
because it's the one time in life that you have to really be selfish. Not to say that you're supposed to, lash out at other people and be inconsiderate of their needs, but you have to take care of you. And the only way that you can do that is to feel every second of hurt, and to embrace the happiness, because that's another part.
Mhm.
You're not prepared for that. It's because the first time I laughed after losing him, I'm like, what the heck is wrong with you? Your child is gone. What are you laughing
Right.
at? How can you find any sense of joy in this world where he isn't? And so, and then so you there's this constant guilt and shame, so you're literally on an emotional roller coaster. In any day you can go from angry to sad to happy to, shameful in the course, of an hour. So,
Right.
it's literally not even living day to day, it's living moment by moment, you know. And whatever that day looks like at the end, process it and give yourself grace and say, okay, I'll set a goal for tomorrow. Today I couldn't get up, I couldn't get dressed, and I got out of bed. So tomorrow, even if I get up, I shower, and I get back in the bed, that's an accomplishment for that day. And there's no time limit. I think that's the greatest advice that I can give. Don't let someone else tell you that there's a timestamp on your grief or your loss. You know, you're going to feel that loss for the rest of your life, but find a way to live within that loss. Find a way to move not on from your loved one, but to move forward for yourself.
Well, you answered my next question without me even asking it, because we get that a lot, in therapy, especially when someone is going through grief. We get that question of, how do I live life without them? And how can I be happy? I feel guilty for being happy and they're not here. So you answered all of that without me even asking. So my final question, as we wrap and as we close, how do individuals get in contact with you or your nonprofit to support in any way? How do they go about doing that?
Okay, we're on social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter at A Bold Story Never Ends. I'm sorry, Instagram and Facebook at A Bold Story Never Ends. We're on Twitter as A Bold Story, and we have a YouTube page as A Bold Story. We also have a webpage at www.aboldstoryneverends.org, and we are hosting an event on September 30th. It's a suicide awareness month event, and it's entitled "Together We Are Stronger," and it's a family fun day. Which is, I guess, kind of, you're like, how does this work? How are we talking about
Yeah.
suicide yet having fun? But the whole premise is that with dealing with suicidal ideations, connections are so important. And so the fun day is all about connecting families with games and activities that encourage the ability to talk and to spend time, so that you can form those connections, so that there's no one in your family who is struggling and not having someone that they can talk to about it, and also connecting with people. We're going to connect with resources in our community. We're going to have Passion and Purpose Filled Life there, and doing a presentation. Ms. Carter's going to do a presentation, and connect you with more with her services, with her journal and things like that, because all of those are resources that you can use to hopefully keep suicide away from your family. So that's the whole premise of our event on the 30th. It's going to be in Missouri City at Kitty Hollow Park from 4 to 7 p.m. And we are on Eventbrite. So if you want to be a part of that, please go on Eventbrite, look up Together We Are Stronger Family Fun Day, and register for your tickets.
Thank you. So I want to tell our viewers, because we're not just Texas, we are worldwide. BHC Media is worldwide. We're streaming on Roku, Amazon, Fire, Apple, all those great stations. And so even if you're not in the Texas area and you can't make it, you can still support this wonderful cause. We all have family that have struggled in some way or some form. So please reach out. You all know you can find me on the internet, on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter at Passion and Purpose Fulfilled. You can find me on my website at www.passionpurposefulfilled.com. And you can link up. I'm going to put the new event that will be on September 30th on the webpage. I'll have that link there as well, so you can check it out. And we just want to make sure we're wrapping our loving arms around each other. Self-care is not selfish, and we want to ensure that we're following and living on purpose. So thank you so much, Antwanette, for joining me today. Thank you for our viewers and our listening audience. Please, please, please love yourself and love your neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you.